So I'm Christine Blower, I'm the chair of this session. I'm sitting between two people who need no introduction, but just because it's such a pleasure to be here, I'm going to introduce them anyway. So our first speaker, already mentioned any number of times from this platform this morning, is John McDonnell MP. And as if you didn't know, John McDonnell has been Labour MP for Hayes and Hollington since 1997. Over the summer, John acted as Jeremy Corbyn's campaign agent in his successful campaign. It's a bit understated, that. These are my chair's notes. His successful campaign. His brilliant and superb campaign, I'd have written. Anyway, 2 days after Jeremy was declared leader of the Labour Party, which we've already enjoyed a number of times, John was appointed as Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I have to tell you, some days after that, Kevin Courtney, my deputy, and I were in the DFE. We were downstairs having a cup of coffee, and John came in, not to be doing Shadow Chancellor stuff, but to be doing constituency work. John is, of course, a great friend of the trade union movement, and he was the parliamentary convener of the TUCG until his appointment of Shadow Chancellor, which is so important that he can't do that for us now, but that has been taken on by Ian Minns, and we're very pleased with that. So, John, would you like to make some remarks for us? Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you. It's all right. We're short of time. Okay, thanks. It's been a rough old week. And so it's good to be amongst comrades and brothers and sisters. Let me just say this very briefly, because like you, I've come here to listen to Yanis. I spoke on the same platform as him at the PCS Fringe at the TUC, and we tried to have a conversation afterwards, but he was surrounded by about 50 fans trying to get his book signed, one of which was my wife, who sends her apologies today, but says, can she meet you at some other... Anyway, never mind. Someone introduced me at one point in time as the Yanis Varoufakis of the UK, and I said I could never be that cool. Never. Let me say what's happening at the moment. We've got the Comprehensive Spending Review on Wednesday and the Autumn Statement. Now, some of you may well have been following some of the detail of this over the last few days. The situation is this, to be frank. Osborne, in 2010, set out his fiscal approach, which was basically a promise to cut the deficit completely by this year and to reduce the deficit significantly. And his target on the debt was about 69% of GDP by this year. So at that point in time, most of us told him that there was no chance, there was absolutely no chance whatsoever of reducing the deficit on that scale, eliminating the deficit within 5 years and reducing the debt on that scale. The only way it could be done is by massive investment and growing the economy, which he wasn't willing to do. So we're now in a situation where none of those targets have been met. And this year, he's down to about, he's reduced the deficit by about half. And instead of the debt being 69% as he predicted, it's now above 80% and getting worse by the minute, because he tried to engender, typical politician that he is, he tried to engender a sort of mini boom before the last general election to bring in some votes on the basis of they thought he could convince people that they were economically secure. So this week, we're now in a situation where on Wednesday he'll come before the House of Commons and he'll present plans for a cut across government departments of about 20–25% overall. In addition to that, he'll make a big fanfare of, I'm sure he's going to do his Bob the Builder speech from Tory party conference about how much he's going to invest in the economy. But it looks as though on his plans, the investment in the infrastructure, skills, etc., will be reduced. Now, our target, just to stand still from the OECD, is about 3.5% of the GDP. And his Red Book predictions, it's going to go down to 1.4% of GDP. Possibly the lowest in the G7. So in addition to cuts, and despite what fanfare will be brought forward in terms of investment, a level of investment that isn't even just maintaining the basis of what we'd expect from an economy in the 21st century. And I think what he'll try and do is jiggle the figures a little bit, and he'll come out with some announcements about some improvements in some areas around pensions and maybe a bit around council tax lift to tackle social care. But the reality is it will be a prediction of another 5 years of grinding austerity. Grinding austerity. And why is that happening? Well, at the moment, one of the reasons is because of having failed to invest for 5 years, despite limited growth in the economy, actually that growth even now is beginning to fall back. It looks as though manufacturing will certainly go into recession this month. In terms of the current account deficit, that's what they used to call in the old balance of payments that used to always worry past governments. We're now in a situation where we have a current account deficit with the rest of the world on a scale that we've never seen before in our history. And part of that is because we just don't trade in the way we did, we don't make things anymore. But in addition to that, part of that is the foreign assets that were owned by the UK is not retrieving the money that it used to. But in addition to that, we've sold off so much of our assets that actually income is being driven out of the UK into the hands of foreign investors. And I have to say, most probably the Chinese People's Republic. Now, I never ever thought that I would see a Conservative Chancellor as a campaigner for the nationalisation of our industries by the Chinese Communist Party. It is... I don't know what Mao's doing in his grave. Whether it's spinning or smiling, I don't know. But in addition to that, the reason for another 5 years of austerity under the Tories is basically his plans to cut the corporation tax to the largest corporations in our country. His ambition over the next 2 years is to reduce corporation tax to 18%. The lowest in the G7, the lowest in Europe. And his argument is that by reducing taxes well, it's the old trickle-down argument, isn't it? Those companies are taking the tax cuts, they're increasing the dividends to their shareholders on a scale we've not seen before, but in addition to that, they're hoarding money. Yanis and I have been having a conversation about how much. The predictions are about, and the corporations, they're sitting on about 750 billion. Well, I've been trying to be conservative. I'm trying to be conservative about this. I'm saying about 400 to 500 billion. So they're sitting on money, earned income. They're sitting on and refusing to invest. And to be frank, they're laughing all the way to the bank because in addition to that, he's giving them £110 billion a year in tax reliefs or what they call tax expenditures, which are meant to somehow incentivize them to invest. And our investment levels, I just tell you, in science, where we excelled as a country, in science, our investment level is down to 0.5%, less than 0.5% of our GDP. Our science and budgets have been cut by £1 billion over the last period. We're falling behind the rest of the world on some of the scientific breakthroughs that we discovered. I was at Imperial College yesterday launching a statement around where we should go from here in terms of our investment strategy. And the news basically is that link with universities that we used to build up for the research that we would do, the research and development that could then set off with, yes, entrepreneurs and others to develop the products and new markets, we're being driven into the sand by a lack of investment. That's where we're at. And yet on Wednesday, I tell you, the media will portray George Osborne as the savior of the country, someone with a long-term, if I hear that expression again, I'll throw up, the long-term economic plan, and all the old slogans will come out. Fixing the roof while the sun shines. All this cobblers, that pardon the expression, he comes out with. What we've got to do is, of course, we've got to oppose austerity wherever it comes. And I tell you, I'm fearful. Well, I'm fearful. I met the local government leaders last week, Labour local government leaders. They're telling us discretionary expenditure is virtually gone now. We're down to our statutory duties. And on social care, they're saying we're near to collapse in the next 2 years unless we get some additional support. They're running their reserves down now. Now, Osborne looks as though he's going to offer them a 2% increase on the council tax to cover that. That isn't enough. The consequences of collapse in social care means that people turn up at accident emergency services or they suffer. So the NHS now is going to offer maybe 8 to 10 extra billion pounds. At the same time, he's asking them to make savings of £22 billion. And you know as well as I do, in our area, every area now, the NHS is in crisis this winter. But also, let me just say this as well. Those people working within our public service and in the private sector are under intense pressure. I don't know, you may have seen the survey from 2 weeks ago of the increase in suicides amongst firefighters, police officers, and other public sector workers. Under pressure because they're doing long hours for less pay with their conditions and their pensions continuously under threat. That's the life that they expect us to lead. And what we're saying very, very clearly now, and I'll sum up at this because we've got limited time and we want to listen to Yanis and we want to go into questions as well. The future is this. If the Tories continue with their plans, we have no other option but to resist them in every way we possibly can. And that means, let me be clear, that means mobilizing our communities now in an anti-austerity campaign that this country has not seen before on this scale. Linking trade unions with the new leadership of the Labour Party and all other progressive organisations into an anti-austerity campaign that exposes what's happening on the ground to people, so we don't get divided and isolated. The reason they're introducing the trade union bill is because they know the trade union movement is the one organisation that's left on any scale with the resources, with the experience to mobilise that resistance campaign. Now, for the first time in a long time, alongside the trade union movement, you will have a Labour leadership committed to anti-austerity campaigning. That's the breakthrough of Jeremy Corbyn. Secondly, we need to move on from austerity and present our alternative. Our alternative is to end austerity, and the way we do that is we end the tax cuts to the rich and the corporations. We start forcing them to pay their way and pay their taxes, ending the tax evasion and tax avoidance. We can make sure they no longer have the tax reliefs and then don't spend it in the direction in which we want. We rebuild our economic base, but we do it with the intention that we harness all of our resources, and that means making sure that workers can sit on company boards, that we develop a cooperative movement, that we bring back mutuals, so we start controlling democratically our economy again. But we invest in a way in which the rewards of those investments are fairly shared through a fair taxation system, a democratic, free, prosperous society based upon a common effort. No longer, I believe, can we tolerate anymore the extremes of wealth and poverty that have happened under the Conservatives. No longer can we accept anymore the lack of democracy in our country, not just at the ballot box, but also in terms of economic democracy. In that way, I think we can rebuild our society and rebuild our economy. I just say this one thing, I said it yesterday in one of the speeches, that I did around the economy. We've got a huge financial sector here, but we've got to rebalance our economy. Up in Sheffield at the moment, there's a huge rally going on for steel. We've got to rebuild our manufacturing base, but be clever about it, invest for the long term. And if that means public engagement, public intervention, state intervention, short-term nationalisation to rebuild the economy, that's what we need to do. But in addition to that, I have to say this. We've got to ensure that we build our economy on the basis of fairness and social justice. So it isn't just about fair wages, it's about making sure no one is left behind, no one is homeless, no one lives in poverty, and everybody has a future. It's called socialism. Solidarity.